Oh, and the band said that either they were going to be here early and start drinking, or else they encouraged us, the audience, to start at our will, which they meant was substantially before showtime.
Yes.
Yeah, I know how that goes. Starting next month, for your convenience, we will begin closing up sharply at 3 o'clock on Friday and Saturday. Especially Saturday. But now, welcome to another episode of I Don't Get It. I know you don't, so why do you keep watching? Just so I can tell you that I don't get it. Should have known. Now tonight's news. One man had a container which he believed was damaged by certain contents. But after much effort to remove the ones in question, he discovered it was an endless struggle, and even in moments of temporary success, he found it made no permanent difference. When it comes to matters non-physical, men learn only through words. But given even that, a few men still learn most about singularly human events, affairs, via information that is of a verbal nature, yet never actually spoken. On Father's Day, one man honored trees, and on Mother's, paid tribute to birds. When you care enough to say the very least. One man had a container which he believed would be better off with no contents therein. But whenever he was able to empty it, the container would disappear. Should you want to lift the weight of the universe and had the desire and mind to do so, you still would be unable to lift the weight of the mind. One man had a container whose contents he found troublesome. But after much effort to change the situation, he began to see the nature of the container as the true source of the perceived trouble. To be totally attentive to the moment and to what you are doing therein is to comprehend that the moment and what you are doing are irrelevant. One man had a container that bothered him much. Then he finally realized that it wasn't the container itself, but what was in it, and of your rights. I believe that you have adequately confused me as regards the containers and contents. I think you can move on to something else now. But sir, there is nothing else. To himself, one eagle said, "The worst result of my living with worms is how often they claim to be birds and how routinely I react negatively thereto. This undebatably renders me no better than the dreamy, deluded slugs, and my actions thusly, increasingly, disturb me much. And yet with all my resolve beforehand, once I hear worms mouthing imitatively the words and ideas of eagles, I am instantly angered and disgusted. What to do?" And after much effort devoted to this vexing situation, the eagle finally was struck with the notion of changing his verbal view of the circumstances so as to read not the worst result of my living with worms, but to the worst result of my thinking that I live among worms. And with this shift, indescribable perspective, did the mighty bird expand the scope of his understanding and loose himself from yet another meaningless earthly shackle, to soar internally even freer. Freer from his own self and judgments, freer from his own imagined self and fictitious verdicts. One man had some lifelong possessions that annoyed him greatly. Then he began to suspect that was what he kept the man that was the true cause of his annoyance. At one time, people believed that character counted for more than intelligence, and all was well until they started defining character in terms of behavior. You can't be taught to be who you are, but you can discover how to be. For many years, one man was troubled by the type of calls he received, then ultimately turned his attention to the nature of phone service itself. Here, it's for you. Hey, keep that thing away from me. That's how Adam punctured his mental ear in the first place. A man who had never received the fame and fortune which he believed was his due, one day thought, what I need is a sponsor. That's it. A sponsor is what I need. And under its universal breath, life muttered, what do you call what I've been doing for you? Which, at first blush, seemed to be a point well made. Until the man pondered the matter a moment more, then realized, as should everyone, that even though what life said is technically correct regarding its sponsorship of man, it is done so in a faceless collective level, not on a personal individual one, which alone is where such matters as fame and fortune appear to exist. All of this a confusing area, but one which, if I may be so bold as to speak on life's behalf, it could easily clear up for men if they would but ask the right questions, rather than complaining to life about lack of success in matters that are ultimately secondary to life's own health and survival. Sponsorship might be a useful mechanism, but a man must realize for himself that it is always a matter of self-sponsorship, and that such can only be developed from areas within him that are uninterested in accomplishments that are deemed successes only by virtue of their mortally reciprocal recognition. No one knows if a man is unusually conscious but him and life. And life doesn't notice it. Another definition, in fact, of a more conscious man would be one who complains only when it will have some effect. And if you're halfway conscious, you know when that is, don't you? A woman who had been listening to a man talk about this for some time one day said to him, the way you keep changing your description sometimes make me think that you may not know what you're talking about. To which the man replied, sometimes I know that I do not know what I'm talking about, particularly when I am talking about it. And the woman's concerns seemed assuaged, and she began to understand things for herself. A king one day asked the official weather guesser, how'd you get into such an unrewarding line of work? And he replied, I was fired from being a reporter. And the king noted, that's hard to believe. What did you do before that? And the man replied, I was a priest, but was given no duty, so I left. And the ruler made further note to the curiosity of the situation, and asked the man what he'd been engaged in before that, and he replied, before that, your grace, I was you before you were born. And his highness was suddenly struck and delighted. My God, that's great. That explains why I'm so attracted to those in totally useless positions. After having a brief and most unusual encounter with a stranger, a man began to suspect that something had taken place that he missed, and sought the stranger out again and asked him regarding their prior meeting, were you trying to teach me something? And the stranger replied, were you trying to learn something? A man struggling to do this is like someone who wants to go home but refuses to do so. After committing an exceptionally clumsy act, a man said, well, you don't see that every day. To which a bystander responded, but you see everything every day. You just don't take notice of it. The truth of which threatened for a moment to make the first man clumsy again. Quick, make a choice. Would you rather spend the rest of your life still struggling with this, or be made a complete idiot instead? One man was twin brothers. Sometimes he let brother A be in charge, and sometimes brother B. But no matter which one he let be in charge, he was in no wise responsible for which one was in charge. Oh, I get it, said brother C, which means we have now moved into the realm of real possibilities. One man thought, a lot of what I think makes sense. Well, a lot of it doesn't, which leads me to consider that thinking is just a little joke that thinking plays on itself. An observation that caused Brother D to begin to stir. The longer he was on the train, the better did one man feel about the journey, but became concerned over not knowing if it was due to his getting closer to his destination or simply that he was getting further away from his place of departure. A stranger hawking papers up and down the aisle suggested that worrying about this was useless. Pertinent, but useless. When it comes to studying matters that are important compared to those that are not, forget about it. One man says, people understand what's going on in life about as good as they want to. And another man asked, is that true? And the first man replied, not exactly, but it's about as close to it as you can express it. One man's question for a Monday, how can thoughts be so apparently important and still be seemingly such a problem? Fact, if you await the arrival of Friday, Thursday will never make sense. A father said to a son, in your struggles to walk in my footsteps as they were before you were born, remember this for as long as it works for you, that there are two experiential levels of all of this, the great realization and the great liberation. One of them obviously is a knowing, while the other, not so obviously, is what eventually happens to one from the knowing. And such directions from his future past proved well to serve the lad, insofar as they continued to, well, serve him, as initially by his father noted. The benefits and pleasures that remain unmined by most geographically is that all destinations are someone else's points of departure, and vice versa, including yourselves. And one boy said to his father, I want to get someplace that you can't get to from here. And the older one replied, such are the only destinations available to man. You mean mentally, added the lad. Of course, said the old man. Amidst all the waves and tossing, a lad was heard to say, I am seasick. Do not say that, replied a father. Say that you are thought sick. After much and long ado about it, one man finally thought, what is my problem other than simply bad mental habits? And one man thought, I've got to quit isolating the problem. So as to save himself from accusations of favoritism, one man asked that the whole world stand up and take a bow while the rest of us provide the appropriate applause. A man asked an expert, what causes ulcers? Seriousness, he replied. The man then asked, what causes seriousness? Ulcers, replied the expert. The man then asked, in just what field are you an expert? Answering idiots, he replied. FYI, how to commit suicide in a locked room. Ask a question. FYI, part 2. One man was torn between two feelings. FYI, part 3. There was once a world in which all creatures were born with a clown face painted on their bottoms. And to go along with it, there seemed to be some sort of unwritten law that said everyone should continually be dropping their drawers. FYI, coda. Don't bother saying that you don't get it. No one does. The matter of sanity, finally, rationally examined. To survive in a madhouse, you must take it seriously. A boy asked his father, how do you go about taking something seriously? By taking it as it appears to be, he replied. And the lad pressed, but what if it is not actually as it appears to be? Makes no difference, the elder replied, and the youngster further inquired, but what if it is, just like it appears to be? Still makes no difference, his father responded. A totality of comments which, in later life, inspired the boy to move his place of residency from where people took things seriously. And now we have an improved version of a news story from last week. One man thought, confused? Uncertain? Damn right I'm confused and uncertain. And you want to know why? You want to know why? Well, I'll tell you why. I don't know why. In fact, I see no reason I should any longer be confused and uncertain. End quote. A father told a son, there are 2 times when you should not speak. When you know what is going on, and when you're asked what is and you don't know. No. When one man asked for yet another description of how to go about doing this, he was told, disrobe the mind. When a man once asked for yet another description of how to go about doing this, he received the reply, disrobe the mind. And he wanted to then ask, why did you say the mind rather than my mind? And had it pointed out that he had no mind of his own, only a mind. And from that, he began to understand things for himself. A man said to his traveling companion, how long have we been on this road? And the other replied, far too long, I fear, if we still have concerns regarding time and progress. A response that momentarily brought the man to a new state of senses. On one planet, the creatures have a legend that says the positive forces of creation, after their initial work was complete, and they decided to throw into the mix the appearance of contrary evil doings, did so by bringing into being the concept of the momentary. Upon hearing the story for the first time, a visitor from another galaxy says, I don't like it, but that's just my immediate reaction. I'll probably get over it. When he was young, one boy looked everywhere his father pointed. Then when older, he looked everywhere but there. Then when he actually matured, he looked back where his elder had initially pointed and realized that the first time around, he had missed it all. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but there'd been nothing to miss. Mm-hmm. The best thing about not going anywhere is to be aware of it. After making his way through all of the candy to the bottom of the box, he discovered his prize, himself, all grown up and complete. There was once an archer whose greatest successes occurred when he took no aim. A stranger offered a man a magical 10-line poem, and the man pointed out that it had only 9 lines, and the stranger pointed out that the man was the final line. Some father neurons said to some son ones, let's get real. Anyone who admits, this is just my opinion, admits that they're an idiot. When one is in the state of seeing the state of things, any word said about it is a throwing of a rock in the wrong direction. One father told a son, while you're having thoughts, it's probably easiest on you to make them happy ones. And the lad replied, but my natural disposition doesn't seem to lend itself to such. Then before the old man could respond, the boy added, yeah, and I bet you're going to say, all the more reason, right? And the elder closed his eyes, dropped his head, and with a faux sheepish smile, nodded, yep. A couple of lions were stretched out in the noonday shade, and one of them said, what you figure is the point in humans getting all fired up and ready to kill at times when they're obviously not going to eat the object of their rage? And the other one, as he gently plucked something from the corner of his eye, replied, beats me too. But I assume it's traits such as that has taken them to the position, I believe as they call it, of king of the hill, master of the planet. And with that, they both began to roll around and laugh uproariously. And between their gleeful outbursts, one of them was further heard to say, guess you notice how few of them come out here unarmed to see us and debate the merits of their claim. And they both continued to laugh, but while knowing quite well that they were unable to realize what they were, quite well that they were unable to realize that they were but fundamental, nonverbal molecular activity in some human, somewhere, who was pondering such matters as they were discussing. Mm-hmm. A king asked his personal trainer, What is the heaviest thing in the universe? The human mind, sire. The human mind full of thoughts. There is a mythical planet on which punchlines are the first conceived, with the setups coming afterwards. Hey, some galaxies turn clockwise, others counter-so. Mary, Mary, mostly contrary. How does your garden turn? And finally, the stories of. The stories of whales. The story of whales is the story of minnows. And the story of minnows is the story of oaks. And the story of oaks is the study of iron. And the study of iron is the study of man. And there you have it once again.